Yesterday, we talked about a time in history called prehistory, before anything was written down. Today and every day after this, when we talk about the history of Texas, we'll be talking about history that has been written down, from eyewitness accounts, diaries, letters. And so, what we're learning about the native Texans today has all been written down by someone. When I say native Texans of the coastal plains, what I'm really saying is that these are the first people that we know of in history that lived in the coastal plains of Texas. The native Texans that we're talking about today are the Karankawas and the Atakapans. These two tribes lived right along the coast of Texas, right near the ocean. At the very bottom of your paper, color this portion with your pencil, because this is where these two Indian tribes lived. Think about what the land is like in the area where these native Texan tribes lived. What kind of food do you think that they would have found to eat? What kind of houses do you think they would have lived in? For bonus points, at the very top of your paper, on the Coastal Plains Indian page, write down what you think they ate and what kind of house you think they lived in. Most Atakapan and Karankawa Indians lived in wickiups or brush shelters. Up at the top, this is a picture of a wickiup. It's basically just made of really thin limbs of trees bent and tied together. And sometimes they would take animal skin and put over the top, but a lot of times they would just put other branches and leaves across to make a shelter. If you've ever watched like Survival Man or something show like that, a lot of times you'll see them kind of lean sticks up against something, maybe against a big log or something like that, and then cover it up with more leaves and sticks, and then they'll crawl on the inside down in here to sleep. That's called a lean-to or a brush shelter. And the reason they made these kinds of houses was because their main way of living was to move from place to place. And they moved about every 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. And so if you're thinking about moving every 2 weeks, you're probably not going to want to spend the majority of your 2 weeks in a place building a really nice fancy house. So because they moved so often, they needed a house that they could put up really fast. If you're someone who's moved a lot, you know that you don't want to carry a lot of things with you when you move because it's a real pain. And so they didn't want to carry materials for their house from place to place. They just used what they could find in the place that they moved to and built a new house. Right down here at the bottom of your page, you have a little box that says draw a picture to describe these American Indians. Give yourself a little bit of room on this end of the box to draw either a brush shelter or a wickiup. Don't take up the whole box. You're going to need some more of it. Just this end right here. The Karankawa Indians were known to be very tall and very strong. This says that they put canes in their nose, which basically means that they wore a stick in their nose, kind of like someone today might wear a nose ring, only they didn't have a ring, they used a stick, which sounds kind of gross to me, but that's what they thought was cool looking. They also wore a lot of tattoos and pierced different parts of their bodies, kind of like we do today. Lots of people today wear tattoos and pierce their nose or pierce their ears, and the Karankawa Indians did that too. The Karankawa Indians, for the most part, were very friendly. They got along with most people and tried to help people out that were around them, unless you had a fight with them. Now, if they were provoked, that means that you picked on them in some way, then they would really cause a lot of trouble and really fight back, which, isn't kind of how most of us are. Most of us are pretty nice unless you make us mad, and that's how they were too. In this part of your box, draw a picture of what you think a Karankawa Indian looks like based on what we just talked about. We'll leave some space over here. The Atakapans were known to be short and stocky. That means they were thick and muscly. and they had really bushy hair, which always makes me laugh when I think about that because I wonder if their hair was as bushy as mine. On this end right here of your box, draw a picture of what you think an Atakapan might have looked like. The Atakapans and Karankawa both lived together in small bands of 30 or 40 people, led by a chief or leader that they elected, which means they voted on a leader, just like we vote for leaders today. Historians think that they lived in groups of between 30 and 40 because you could help protect each other with a bigger group like this. But if it had been much bigger than that, it would have been really hard for them to find enough food to feed themselves. So they believe they lived in groups of about this size. On your box right here, copy what's on this slide, all these words that are here. Copy those right here onto your box. It's okay if your words need to go across that line in the middle because this slide applies to both sides of the chart. When we talk about an economic system for a native Texan tribe, what we're really talking about is how they traded things to get something that they lacked. When we are talking about our economic system today, we trade money usually back and forth, but these tribes did not use paper money or coins. Instead, they traded food that they had extra of to maybe a tribe that didn't have it. So maybe a tribe that had lots of buffalo skins might have traded the fisherman tribe for maybe some fish. The fishermen also traded beads and pottery that they made. Put this slide, sorry I didn't mean to move that. Put the words on this slide down here at the bottom on this part of the chart. And again, it's okay if it goes over the lines. Maybe you already guessed this part. At the beginning, I showed you some pictures of the coastal plains. You might have guessed, and you would have guessed correctly, that the fishermen ate seafood. They also ate seeds and nuts, and sometimes they even ate locusts if they were really hungry. And we know this because someone wrote in their diary that they saw the Atakapans and Karankawa eating locusts. Both of these tribes, the Atakapan and the Karankawa, were nomads. What that means is that they roamed from place to place looking for food. So if they ran out of food in one place, they moved to another, and that's just the definition of nomad. Now you're going to take what's on this slide right here, all of these words right here, that's what the fishermen ate, and you're going to put those in this box right here. Some other interesting things about how the fisherman Indian lives were it is recorded in several diaries that the Karankawa and Atakapan were seen using alligator fat, and sometimes in one letter even it says shark fat mixed with dirt for bug repellent. Just like when you go outside and there's lots of mosquitoes, and if you've ever been attacked by mosquitoes, you know they can just drive you crazy. And so I can't imagine living in those brush shelters and being outside all of the time. I just think that mosquitoes would just make you nuts. And so one of the things that they did to help with that was they smeared alligator fat and dirt all over themselves to try to keep the bugs off. And if you ever watch like Animal Planet, there's lots of animals in Africa, and there's lots of bugs there too. And you'll see they'll do that too. They'll roll around in the dirt, and that seems to help with the bugs. Another thing that they did was they would very often give their babies two names. They felt like names had a lot of power, and so they would give the baby a name that everyone else in the tribe would know, and they would use that kind of in public, but their real name they would keep secret and only tell to the people in the family. And one of the most interesting things to me about the Karankawa and Atakapan tribes were that they like to shape their babies' heads into cones. And this always really causes my classes to go wild when we talk about this because it seems really strange to us. But back then, this is what they thought was pretty. And so that's what they did. Now, I'm going to show you how they did that on the next slide. But for right now, before we go on, so you don't forget, to go back and do this. Right now, you're going to write these words that I underline: alligator fat, shaped babies' heads to a cone shape, and babies' two names. Just put those words that are underlined. Don't put all the other ones. Don't go crazy with the words. Just put some of those words right there that are underlined. Put those words right down here in the second box over here that you have left on social system. When you get that done, move on to the next slide and I'll explain the whole cone-shaped head thing. I can just see your little faces right now when you get to this slide and you're going, oh, gross, this is so weird, gross. Why did they do that to their heads? And how did they do that to their heads? Well, the only way I really know how to explain it is, have you ever looked at like pictures of your grandparents or your mom and dad when they were like younger? And they go, oh, how embarrassing, my hair looks so weird. Or maybe you look at them and go, they look so weird. Well, they probably didn't think they looked weird at the time, because whatever they were doing to their hair, or maybe they were wearing funny clothes, those things were in style at the time. And so it just seemed normal to do that. So that's kind of the way it was with these tribes. This is what they thought was cool and pretty, and so this is what they did. Here's how they did it. What they would do is, when the baby was little, if you have little brothers and sisters, you know this, that the skulls of their heads are not completely finished growing when they're born. And maybe your mom's even said, be careful when you touch their head, watch out for their soft spot. That's because the skull is not completely grown over their head. There are some soft places where the skull hasn't formed yet. And so what they would do is, when their babies were born, and they would take pieces of wood and they would tie those pieces of wood at this part of their head, one here and one at the back of their head. And then they would wrap string like around it, like that, to keep the wood really tight. And then as the baby's head grew bigger and bigger, they would keep this sort of like hat, really, tied to the top of their head. And as the baby grew, their head would take this shape. And so we know that from different letters and diaries that talk about the Atakapan and Karankawa, but we also have some scientific evidence. We have some bones that have been found at old Karankawa and Atakapan camps of those people. So we know that that really was what their heads look like. So kind of cool. Both the Karankawa and the Atakapan had their own language. And we really don't know very much about the Karankawa language, because most of it didn't ever get written down, which is really sad. We don't know what those words were. We know about 100 different Karankawa words that were written down. And so if you want to, you can take a minute and just kind of look at the different words that are here that we know were Karankawa words, just to kind of, just for fun, just to look at. The Karankawa were sometimes called dog raisers, and we know that they had small dogs that they trained and used around their camp, and so that's sort of what their name means. Also, both the Karankawa and the Atakapan used canoes. When they moved back and forth from place to place, they used canoes to move back and forth. The Atakapan name comes from a Choctaw word that means man-eaters. And that's because lots of people wrote down in different places that the Atakapan, they had seen the Atakapan actually eating other people. However, most historians believe that that was really the Karankawa Indians, based on what they described these people looking like. And so the Atakapan tribe actually has never called themselves Atakapan. That was what other people call them. They call themselves Ishak, which means the people. Some Atakapans today will call themselves Atakapan Ishak. And so really, I think they kind of think it insulting for people to call them man-eaters, since that wasn't really them. That was the Karankawa. The Karankawa, there is lots of recorded history that talks about the Karankawa eating other people, but they did not eat the other people for food. When they were in battle with another tribe, after they killed their enemies, they were known to eat parts of the other people, and they did that because they thought that made them stronger. Now you're probably going, this is really gross, but that really is what they did. We actually know a lot about the Atakapan language. Lots and lots of their language did get written down. And here's just a few of the words for different colors. These are all color words, which I just think is so interesting to kind of know that all the native Texan tribes had their own language. We sometimes don't think about that. On Monday, we're going to learn about some other tribes from the coastal plains, so you can actually take your packet and put it in your writing folder until then. See you next time.